Hi everybody, my name is Karen Fabian and I'm the founder of Bare Bones Yoga, and I'm here to do a quick video about auditioning for a teaching job. Over the past couple of days, I've had a number of conversations with teachers in my Facebook group on anatomy around auditions they're going to be doing and how to approach them. And I want to give you a couple of tips that from my perspective can really help you shine through and distinguish yourself by being yourself. And let's face it, that's really one of the things we want to do when we teach, whether it's for an audition or just teaching in general. We want to be able to shine through, we want to be able to show up authentically, because that is always how we are the most powerful communicators. So here are a couple of tips. The first thing is to keep your sequence really simple. Now this might seem counterintuitive, and maybe you're thinking if you're going into an audition, it's helpful to do something really complicated. But think about it, the more complex you create a sequence, or the more complex the sequence is that you share, the less the number of people that are going to be able to do it well and safely and comfortably and enjoyably. And so from the perspective of the person you're auditioning for, that decreases the number of people who will access your class. So you really want to up that. So keeping things simple is a great way to do it. Now simple doesn't mean easy, so you can certainly play with variables like holding people in poses longer, or doing some little variations in each pose that adds a little bit of a challenge without making the entire sequence really complicated. The next tip I'm going to share is to keep your cues just to action-oriented cues. Now in the method I use to teach teachers anatomy, I share that there are 4 kinds of cues: action cues, alignment cues, anatomy cues, and feeling-based cues. And I go into this in detail in the training that I do in my Blueprint Learning program. I also have a free webinar that I can share with you that goes into these cues in more detail. So I'll share that as a link on this video here. So going into your audition, I would suggest you definitely use action cues only, and I'm going to give you an example of that here. So action cues are just things that anyone can understand. They really just speak to what you want the person to do. So things like push away from the mat, or squeeze the muscle in your thigh, reach your arms up in the air, spread your fingers out wide. These are all action-oriented cues. And then the last thing that I would say is not only, let's just review, keep your sequence itself pretty simple. The next thing is the cues, keep the cues action-oriented. And then the last thing is to give yourself the freedom or permission, because sometimes we need to hear that we have permission to do this, to show up in an authentic way. So that might be you share a little story. It might be you kind of laugh a little bit in a kind of lighthearted way, if appropriate, during the sequence, just to show people that you're comfortable in your own skin. It might just be in the way you carry yourself. And I would say that last one is the most important thing. Because let's face it, if you are confident around what you are teaching, you're going to have the freedom to show up authentically. And you're less likely to kind of act like you're trying to impress somebody, or to kind of confuse your wording, or to come across like you're really nervous. So all of these things will give you the freedom and the space so that you can catch your breath, feel your feet on the floor, show up confidently, present a confident image, and also really share from the heart. So those are my 3 tips for auditioning. I'm going to give you just a really basic demo of what action cues look like, and even just a really simple sequence that you could, kind of add a little bit onto or use. Now this is, again, going to be simple. So these are going to be things you're really familiar with, like Sun A and Sun B. Just remember, I'm just focusing on action cues. So here's how you could start. Come into child's pose. Take a couple breaths, feel your head rest on the floor, and your hips really heavy. And then come up into tabletop on your hands and knees, and then move your hands forward, spread your fingers wide, tuck your toes, lift your knees up off the mat, press your hips up. Take a few breaths. If you want, you can bend your knees back and forth. Get a little stretch in your hamstrings and at the same time, a little movement in your joints. Walk your feet to the front of the mat. Sweep up to the sky. Forward fold. Now from here, lift a little bit, halfway, and then for plank, set your hands down, step your feet back. Hold your plank for a few moments, press away from the ground, and then move slightly forward and lower just a bit, elbows in, heels back. Point your toes, coming into up dog, root into your hands. Roll over your toes, set your gaze back, downward facing dog. Press away from the floor, press your thigh bones back, draw your belly button in, and walk forward. Lift a little bit, halfway up, forward fold. Reach up all the way, forward fold. You could bend the knees a little bit. Lift halfway up, and then set your hands down, step your feet back. Come a little bit forward, lower halfway, elbows in, heels back. Point your toes, upward dog, press away from the ground. Downward dog, over your toes. Take your right knee to your chest. Step your right foot forward. Press your back heel down, reach up, warrior one. Take a deep breath in, and then release your hands down, step back. Come forward and lower a bit. Upward dog, point your toes, heart forward. Downward dog, roll over your toes. Bring your left knee to your nose. Step your left foot forward. Press your back heel down, reach up. Take a big breath, and then release. Hands down, step back, come forward, lower a bit. Upward dog, heart forward. Roll over your toes, hips up and back. All right, so that was just a really brief demo, and some of the things I want you to notice that I intentionally did, I didn't really cue to the breath, so I wasn't cueing inhale, exhale, which a lot of teachers are taught, and I really think gets in the way of them learning how to cue and expressing themselves in a really clear way. You don't need to cue people to the breath. It is obviously a breathing practice, and breath is a big part of it. However, I think, especially for newer teachers, when you're constantly focused on sharing breathing cues, it can really get in the way of your cadence. It can get in the way of your ability to string essential cues together. So just leave that to the side. Maybe every once in a while you do it. Or you saw in a couple of moments I did focus a little more on breath. Generally speaking though, I didn't give a lot of breath cues. I also intentionally didn't give a lot of pose names. I was really heavily weighting the cues I was giving to simply telling people what I wanted them to do. Because think about it, from the student's perspective, that's the main thing that they want to know from you. What do you want me to do so that I can do this practice? So I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, I'm going to link on this video here the link to my webinar on cue types. I would definitely recommend you watch that because it's a great way to give you a framework for how to share cues. And you can go into a class and decide, I'm going to teach a little action cues, maybe sprinkle in some anatomy-based cues, or maybe like this, you decide, I'm going to teach all action-based cues. So whatever it is, having a framework really helps shape the cues you're going to give, rather than that all too familiar feeling teachers have, which is I have all this information in my head and I have no idea how to filter it so I can share things in a clear and understandable way. And let's face it, that is the name of the game. We want to be clear in our expression to our students so that they can enjoy their practice and really understand what we want them to do. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Namaste.